What's up, everybody? It's Toad back again. Finally, a team called the Jets knows how to win for me as an underdog. How about that? That one felt kind of good, even though I kind of felt bad going against the Oilers boob flashing chick there, and their other like hot female fans who kind of came out of the woodwork during that Stanley Cup Finals run. But it was the play, man. And it went the way that I thought it would. I mean, the Oilers outshot Winnipeg because when will that not happen, especially when the Oilers are just losing the entire game? So some of it was just desperation and trying to catch up. But Hellebuck was the way better goalie in the game, man. Skinner looked like the version of himself from 2 years ago where you just have no idea what to expect out of him. So it felt pretty decent. I'm glad I got that one. Yeah, try to adjust my mic here and have it not as close to my face. How about that? See how this goes. I'm not going to have any plays today, even though this is a packed card. Yesterday I was 1-0-1. I mean, the Royals kind of bailed me out. I mean, I wish they won the game outright, even though I didn't bet on the full game outright. And luckily I didn't because they didn't win. But you know me, with my hatred of the Yankees, the Royals, they came back for me, man. They were down 2-0 going into the bottom of the fifth. They scored 2 runs, I think both with 2 outs in the bottom of the fifth. And you saw my reaction to it, I think, on the Tower Gang pre-show last night. I was just like, hell yeah, man. So that one bailed me out a little bit. So I got the push on the Royals first 5-inning money line. I don't know why this. I think it's my TV just going crazy over here. Messing with my lighting. Let's look at today's slate, man. We got a lot going on. We got baseball, hockey, college football, NFL, but it's like a short card everywhere except for the NHL, and it's early season NHL, so that's why I just don't see any angle that's strong enough for me to actually want to play it, although I'll talk about some certain angles here that may lead me to lean certain ways, especially in college football where there's kind of a lot of information there. But we have 3 college football games, 1 NFL game, a decent-sized NHL slate today as the season kind of gets underway, and then we got 2 baseball games. Both of these series continue. This is the ALDS, actually, in both cases. So NLDS is tied 2-2 and will resume tomorrow night. That was another thing where we didn't know what was going on with the Dodgers starting pitching situation yesterday. So I was thinking if they're going to start Yamamoto, I was thinking that maybe like looking towards an over or something like that because Cease and Yamamoto had both pitched in that series already. The lineups are familiar with both of those guys, and both pitchers didn't even do that well the first time they pitched in the series. But then when it was announced that the Dodgers were going with a bullpen game last night, I was tempted to play the Dodgers. You saw like the public all coming in and being like, the Dodgers are cooked, man. I can't believe they're throwing the series. I'm like, they're not. Like, they're going with a bullpen game, which is probably better than going with one of these starters they was just going to get roughed up, and I was right about that. I didn't expect it to be that much of a blowout. That was crazy, and unfortunate again for me because I'm rooting for the Padres. I don't like the Dodgers. So you know where my rooting interest is going to lie tomorrow, and I don't know if there's going to be an angle to play in that game or not. With Darvish against undecided yet again for LA there, so we'll see what happens there. Speaking of undecided, Detroit Tigers, man, they won yesterday in the early game, which probably not a lot of people paid attention to. These Detroit Tigers, man, with these bullpen games, they keep winning, and they beat Cleveland, and Cleveland actually used a lot of their bullpen yesterday, man. So Cleveland, their bullpen is good, but man, I think Detroit is just is kind of their style of game is messing with Cleveland, I think, at this point. Detroit had a bullpen shutout yesterday with that bullpen game. Keter Montero wound up being the starter, but he only went an inning. Sometimes you get more than an inning out of that guy, but it depends on how like Hinch wants to play those matchups there for Detroit. So he only pitched an inning, and then I forget who it was. Somebody came out of the bullpen as the follower and pitched like 3 innings, and then Detroit was able to bridge the gap and then have the rest of their bullpen come out and just finish the shutout over that entire game. Cleveland did have a starter go yesterday, Alex Cobb. I mentioned I was not, I'm not very convinced that Alex Cobb is great anymore at this point. I mean, obviously he's not that great. I mean, I think he gave up 1 or 2 runs yesterday and only went 2 innings. So they actually kind of gave him more of an opener approach as well. But Cleveland doesn't really do the opener thing, so then they used a lot of their bullpen as well. So I think Cleveland's bullpen, even though it is the better bullpen, I think they're not totally used to doing this, and they're in the worst shape coming into this game. But Cleveland does have Tanner Bibby pitching, and he is their ace. He's their best pitcher. But I faded him in the first game of the series and wound up losing the game as he pitched a shutout, but he only went 4 2/3 innings. I don't know if some of that was just that Cleveland wants to kind of keep these guys ready like for their next start, and they don't want to like overwork their young starters here. I don't know, because I think that was Bibby's first career postseason start, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was. I think that was part of my handicap in that game. So he's going to be back on the hill today, and he is their ace. Really good numbers this year, 3.47 ERA, 1.12 whip, and he did do well against Detroit for the 4 2/3 that he pitched in the first game of the series. But part of the reason I went against him last time was Detroit actually hits him pretty well in 93 at-bats, which I think at this point probably includes that other start. 21-8 strikeout walk ratio. The walk's a little bit high there, but he's allowed a 301 average and 862 OPS to the Tigers hitter. So the Tigers have been able to hit Bibby pretty decently, even though he is a really good pitcher. Detroit has not been unsuccessful against him, and it looks like Detroit is going with an opener approach, which I think makes sense here because I mean, they're up 2-1 here. So Cleveland is going to have to be motivated because obviously this is an elimination game for Cleveland. For Detroit, it is not. So I think what Detroit is going to try to do here is they're going to go with the bullpen approach, hope that they win this game with the bullpen approach, and then if they don't, they'll use Schoolball in Game 5 to use their ace in a deciding Game 5. But what they want to do is they want to win this game with the bullpen approach, and then what they can do is have Schoolball ready for Game 1 of the ALCS, which unfortunately is likely to be against the New York Yankees. So we'll see what Detroit decides to do here, man. But as I've mentioned, Detroit's bullpen approach has not been unsuccessful, and they've won 2 bullpen games in this series, I think. So it has not been, they won one with Schoolball, I think. Actually, my apologies. Yeah, they lost 1 bullpen game and won the other one, and they won the Schoolball start in this series. So never mind. So I think they're 1-1 in bullpen games. And yes, they did use a lot of their bullpen yesterday, but so did Cleveland. But Cleveland's bullpen is the better in general of the two, but Detroit's the one that's more used to this approach and having a lot of bullpen games. So I don't have a play in this game, obviously. We'll see how this goes. The line is on Cleveland as the favorite. It's down from -119 to -118. Total is down from 7 juice to the under to 6.5 juice to the over. So very slight moves downward on Cleveland as the road money line favorite and on the under, but you're not going to see me coming in on these. I don't see any ticket and cash percentages on this yet either, but I don't tend to play under 6.5, man, especially when Bibby does have questionable numbers against Detroit, and we don't really, I don't like the bullpen scenario as far as the under is concerned really in this one either, with the bullpens definitely having been worked a bit yesterday, so not going to find me doing that. As far as the side is concerned, I would probably have to lean to the Detroit side yet again, just because it's that unknown factor where they can throw basically whatever they have at you out of their bullpen, and it's going to throw your hitters off a little bit. And Bibby, I think at some point, even though he did pitch decently, or pretty well really, in his first start in this series, his numbers against Detroit are bad enough that I expect some sort of regression a little bit from that start, although that did mean he got that first career playoff start under his belt, so that might help him a little bit. And then in the late game, Yankees, Kansas City. The Yankees were able to win 3-2 yesterday, and now they have a 2-1 lead. They have the stranglehold on the series, and they're not really letting go of it, really, I wouldn't say, as they're having their number 1 starter come out in this game. Garrett Cole, I consider him to be the number 1 starter. I don't think did he start Game 1 of this series? Maybe he did. I think this is a rematch of Game 1. So I think he is their best starter at this point. He's the one with the most experience pitching in the postseason, whatever, because they have some young starters in that rotation, which I thought could catch up to them at some point. But yeah, this is Cole against Walker. This is a rematch of Game 1. Yankees are down from -150 to -147. They're a road favorite here, which somewhat interesting. So I think as far as the value on the line is concerned, I'm not sure you're getting that much value on the Yankees here, because how much of a favorite were they in Game 1 of this series with the same starting pitching matchup at New York? I think the Yankees are probably -170, somewhere in that range or something. So maybe it makes sense. I think you get like 20 cents for home field. In baseball, maybe it's a little bit less, actually. I don't know. So actually, I guess maybe this line does kind of make sense. It seems to be a little bit of a steep price to play the Yankees, though. And of course, Yankees are a very public team, especially when they're winning. So the tickets are coming in on the Yankees, 77%, 96% of the cash looks like it's coming in on them right now. So it does look like they have the cash percentage, even though there's been a slight move downward total 7.5 juice to the under is flipped to 7.5 juice to the over. 64% of the tickets and 98% of the cash on the over. I don't really agree with this move to the over. I think it might be an overreaction to game one, where game one with these same starting pitchers, that was in Yankee Stadium, which is a more hitter-friendly park than Kauffman Stadium is in Kansas City by a bit. And I think that's going to be kind of misleading in a way, mislead some people into thinking this is going to be another high-scoring game. Do I want to actually play an under in a game with the Yankees offense involved? Not really. And Kansas City used a lot of their bullpen yesterday, man. Their bullpen is in bad shape here. So as far as the side, I actually lean to the Yankees, which is where the cash percentage is. I'll talk about the starting pitching matchup in a minute. And I think Kansas City's specific starting pitching matchup is actually slightly better, but I don't think that's enough of an edge to back Kansas City in this one, even though you are getting a decent home underdog price here. The Yankees, like I said, they have the better bullpen, and if you look at yesterday's game, I could bring them up on my screen, but the Yankees only used like 2 relief pitchers yesterday in that game, even though it was a close game where they kind of had to stop Kansas City at the end from attempting to come back. But the Yankees only used a couple of their relief pitchers, and Kansas City used like 5 relief pitchers yesterday, and they're not the better of the 2 bullpens to begin with. So I think the Yankees have a pretty sizable bullpen advantage in this game, and they have the hitting advantage in this game. So the lean would be to the Yankees in this one, even though Kansas City, big home underdog at this one, or decent-sized home underdog, and they're facing elimination here. And you could argue that they do have a little bit of a starting pitching edge. Again, I do like the under better than the side in this one, though, even though the money looks like it's pushing this up towards the over. I don't really agree with that, again, because the first game of the series with these 2 starters in, neither of them did that well, and it was a 6-5 Yankees win, I think, so it was a high-scoring game. So I think there's going to be some like regression as far as that's concerned, back to what we'd expect with these 2 pitchers on the hill. But yet again, like I said, Kansas City's bullpen is in bad enough shape that I could see their bullpen coming in and blowing the under in this one. So I don't really want that either. But Garrett Cole, I mean, like I said, he didn't have a great start. He did go 5 innings. He allowed 3 earned runs, 7 hits and 2 walks. That's not good. He put 9 men on base, only struck out 4 in that first game. So he wasn't excellent, but he was okay in that first game. He had pitched pretty well down the stretch, really, with a nice 30-7 strikeout walk ratio and 2.53 ERA in the month of September. So maybe he was just trying to get his playoff footing again. And against Kansas City, he has good numbers, and 165 at-bats with a 52-6 strikeout walk ratio, which is a very good ratio, and has held him to a 236 average and 603 OPS. So Kansas City's hitters have not been successful against Cole. Quite the opposite. Michael Wacha, on the other hand, he just faced the Yankees, and he did worse than Cole did. He gave up 3 runs in 4 innings. He walked 3 and gave up 4 hits, put 7 men on base in 4 innings, struck out 3. They each gave up a home run in that game as well, so he didn't do well in that game either. He was pitching better down the stretch as well in September with a 2.6 ERA and 25-7 strikeout walk ratio, so he hit a bit of a snag in this game against the Yankees. Overall, this season, he was good. 3.35 ERA, 1.19 whip. He's a fairly experienced pitcher at this point. So both of these starting pitchers do have decent experience. I think Cole is the more experienced postseason pitcher. I would have to go back and look, because I think Wacha did have some decent postseason experience as well with the Cardinals, but I'd have to go back and look. Both of these guys are pretty experienced pitchers, though, man, and they both have good numbers against the opposing lineups. 97 at-bats worth for Wacha against Yankee hitters. 27-11 strikeout walk ratio, so the walks are a little high, but he's held him to a 155 batting average and 509 OPS. So his numbers, besides the walks, are actually better than Cole's are against Kansas City. So that's why I like the under in this one more than a side. Both starting pitchers have done well against these opposing hitters, despite the fact that they both did not do well in game 1 of the series. And then I have a little bit of extra hesitation because of the other thing I always talk about, which is that when a hitting lineup just saw this same pitcher in their last game, the hitters are more comfortable facing them. They're more familiar with them, so they tend to actually do better the next time out. But in this case, I think because both starting pitchers did like kind of uncharacteristically poorly in that first game, and it was a more hitter-friendly park, I tend to think that they're actually going to not do quite as bad in this one, especially like with the series on the line here for Kansas City. I'm kind of expecting some decent pitching here, although you never really know. So we'll see what happens in that game. I'm not going to play it, but that's the rundown of baseball. We'll go to some hockey now. NHL has a bunch of games in action today. And just briefly, I will talk about, I guess I'll give out what I think are maybe the like stronger leans to really look for in the NHL. I don't have a play today in the NHL, but we do have some interesting scenarios where we do have a few teams played yesterday, so they're on back-to-backs, which does put them in kind of a difficult spot. Montreal is one of them. They're going from Montreal losing, or no, they beat Toronto yesterday, which is a decent win against an original six team there in an original six matchup. But now they have another original six matchup coming to Boston to face my Bruins. And the Bruins at least had yesterday off, but they are returning from Florida. So not a game I want to get involved in. And the Bruins are a big favorite in that one. But teams that played yesterday, I mean, on the back-to-backs, it's tough for them. Pittsburgh is also playing after having played yesterday, and they're having to go from home to Detroit. Not a really huge travel spot there. Detroit has not played yet this season, and Pittsburgh got crushed by the Rangers last night, 6-0. Just not good. Not good for Pittsburgh yesterday. So Pittsburgh, I kind of expect them to bounce back. And actually, the other thing, so yes, teams that are in back-to-backs can be at a bit of a disadvantage because they played yesterday, so they have no rest. So that applies to Montreal here, Pittsburgh, Toronto. It might just be those three today. I think it is. But then the other aspect of what's going on today is that if you have a team that already has a game under their belt this season and you have another team that doesn't, even though, yes, I know they played in preseason, so they did start getting used to playing again, but that team that's already played that one regular season game and gotten it out of the way, or two in some cases, that team I think has a little bit of an extra edge as well because they have those games under their belt already, or they have that first game under their belt already, so they're already kind of in regular season mode, whereas that other team might still have to ramp up a little bit, getting ready to the regular season, playing their first regular season game. So Pittsburgh actually has that edge of having played already, but they're at the disadvantage of the fact that they played yesterday, but they're also kind of in a bounce back spot because that was such an embarrassing 6-0 loss yesterday, even though it was to one of the better teams in the conference in the New York Rangers, one of the best probably, the President's Trophy winner from last year. Detroit has not played a regular season game yet. Pittsburgh having to go to Detroit. Detroit's down from -130 to -128, but they have the cash on them, 60%, 52% on the other side on Pittsburgh. So the market read on that one is on the Detroit side. Interesting. And then what else we got here? Let me see. Toronto, New Jersey, I guess is interesting because as I mentioned, Toronto did play yesterday, and I believe they, what did I say? They lost 1-0 to Montreal. Yeah, so they're going from Montreal down to New Jersey. New Jersey and Buffalo, by the way, are the two teams that played in the Czech Republic. So they both have played two games already that are considered to be regular season games. So they do already have those under their belt, which I think is going to be more of an advantage to Buffalo, even though Toronto did play yesterday. Toronto on the back-to-back could be a little bit of a difficult rest spot here for them. New Jersey and Buffalo both have had, I think, 4 or 5 days off to return from the Czech Republic, but they still have to get used to, switching time zones and stuff like that. So it's kind of a weird spot the teams aren't really used to. So that's why I don't really actually want to take Buffalo or New Jersey, although I think if you forced me to give you my best hockey lean of the day, it would be on the Buffalo side, which I'll talk about in a minute. I know I'm talking about a whole bunch of games at once here, but I'm just kind of talking about what I think about like the different situations here. New Jersey, yeah, so they haven't played since the Czech Republic games. Neither has Buffalo. New Jersey won them both, though. So New Jersey, as a 2-0 team against an 0-1 Toronto team, might be more inviting to the public. So I'm not going to play on that. New Jersey's up from -135 to -140, but it looks like Toronto has the cash. They actually have more of the tickets somehow, with 58% of the tickets, 67% of the cash on them. So the cash percentage is actually on Toronto. I can't do it because they're on a back-to-back. And New Jersey does have those couple of games out of the way already and has that momentum already. But that momentum might have been stopped a little bit by the fact they had that extra rest. So maybe Buffalo is actually in the better spot because Buffalo lost those first two games in the Czech Republic. They have 2 games out of the way already, so they're actually maybe ready to bounce back. So maybe they use that extra rest, even though they did have to come back from Europe. They may have used that extra rest to fix some things and get ready for this home opener against the LA Kings. And the LA Kings are coming into this game cold, man. And I'm pretty sure the public's going to be on the Kings because the Kings have been the better team in the recent seasons. Buffalo hasn't done much of anything, but I don't think this is an easy spot for LA to have to go out to Buffalo. And they do have Boston up next, so they could actually maybe even look ahead to Boston. Although, are you really going to overlook your first regular season game? Probably not, but Boston is a bigger opponent. up next for LA. And LA has actually done pretty well in Boston, which obviously as a Bruins fan, I know. And I've won money in certain cases on Boston returning home from road trips playing the LA Kings there. But this spot here, LA has 74% of the tickets, so they're heavily public. But Buffalo looks like they've reversed line moved a little bit from minus 105 to minus 106, and they have 60% of the tickets on them, or 60% of the cash, excuse me. So it looks like a pros versus Joes scenario here where the Joes, the public, are coming in on the Kings, but the cash likes Buffalo here, and I agree. I like Buffalo in this one. Buffalo, I mean, nobody's going to want this 0-2 Buffalo team that looked like they couldn't do much of anything right against the Devils. Devils, pretty decent team, though, and just a weird situation over in the Czech Republic, so I don't even know if you can really take much away from what happened in those games. I think you can throw those results out for the most part, except that it does mean the Buffalo has 2 games under their belt already, and LA doesn't have any. So I think Buffalo, that's an advantage to them just because they have those opening games out of the way. So any like opening game nervousness and trying to like gain chemistry with like the new personnel you might have and whatever's already kind of taking place for Buffalo. So I think Buffalo does have a couple of edges there in that game. So I agree with what the market is doing there. I'm just not sure that I want to take them with that return home from Europe type of spot there. So I think there are better spots. And then Utah, kind of in an interesting spot here, having to go to the New York Islanders. The market looks like it's strongly against the Islanders here, but I kind of lean to the Islanders slightly, but the Islanders also are in that situation where this is their first game. So Utah has a game out of the way already. So Utah does have the advantage of having already played once. But that was a big game, man. That was their first game. That was their inaugural game as the Utah Hockey Club. And they are basically the Arizona Coyotes from last year. I know they had Connor Ingram in net. And you know that if you followed me last year, I was playing on a lot of Connor Ingram games with Arizona because he was the guy that they were winning more games behind when he was in net. So he was there in that game for Utah. And Utah had a nice game. They won, but it was against a Blackhawks team. It's got a lot of young pieces, and they're still trying to figure out who they are and get things going. Still, it was impressive. I mean, it was a dominant win for Utah in that game. I watched some of the game, and Utah seemed like they were just totally dominating the possession in that game, and they won pretty easily, even though it was, I believe it slipped to 3-2 at one point after they were up 3-0, and then they got an empty netter and then another goal right after that to make it look crazy again, 5-2. But I think that result was not actually really misleading. I think Utah did dominate that game. And now Utah, they do have a game under their belt, and the Islanders do not, as far as the regular season goes. As far as the regular season games go. But Utah, this is kind of a weird travel spot. And you're off that big emotional high of winning your first game as the Utah Hockey Club. So I think it is kind of a letdown looking type of spot to me. But the market looks like it is against it, maybe because Utah does have that one game already, which gives them a little bit of an edge. But traveling from Utah all the way to the east off of that big game doesn't seem like a great spot to me, man. And the Islanders are down from minus 150 to minus 148. They're very public, though, with 90% of the tickets and only 75% of the cash. So the market read is on the Utah side here, with the line dropping on the Islanders and the Islanders having less of the cash than the tickets. So that's kind of the hockey breakdown there. If you were to force my hand on that one, my favorite play, if I were to play anything at all in hockey, it would be the Buffalo Sabres. Now let's try to get this done, man. College football, oh my God. There's a lot to say about these games, actually, and hopefully I can not take too long here. Coastal Carolina at James Madison. This is actually a pretty good matchup between two of the top teams in the Sun Belt, and they can both score a lot. James Madison's up from 9 to 9.5. Looks like the ticket percentage is actually on Coastal with 53% of the tickets and 76% of the cash. So even though the line's moved up a little bit on JMU, it looks like the cash percentage is on the Coastal Carolina side. And I have heard a couple of professional bettors kind of liking the Coastal side in this one. I'm not sure that I agree with the Coastal side here, but I have seen a lot of them also liking the total in this one over. And I'm not so sure I agree with that either. The total is up from 59 to 60.5, juice to the over. So we've seen a little bit of a move to the over here, but 82% of the tickets on the over. I mean, even the public, I think, is going to look at these teams and see how high scoring their games have been. I mean, JMU had a 70 to 50 game against North Carolina a couple of games ago, and Coastal has been putting up some high scores as well. So the public's only going to want to come in on the over here, but 84% of the cash is actually on the under. But I think this is way too dangerous to play an under here. I know the public loves overs. They love primetime overs. These two teams can both score, man, and they're both fairly questionable defensively, so I'm not going to risk trying to take an under in this one, man. It would not be shocking at all if it went over. Seth, what's up, man? Rangers. You like the Rangers, the Phillies, the Baltimore Ravens, and OU, I guess. All right, good luck to you, sir. I'm not a Rangers hater, even though I am a Bruins fan. I have much more loathing of the Pittsburgh Penguins, actually, for the most part, and Montreal. But Montreal's just been so bad recently that you can't really hate them at this point. So, all right, what do we got going on here? Yeah, James Madison. So looking at the scheduling dynamics here, JMU, they're coming off a much more embarrassing game, dude. So they were undefeated, but they really hadn't played anybody. I mean, Charlotte, Gardner-Webb, Ball State. I mean, Gardner-Webb's a good FCS team, kind of, and Gardner-Webb somehow was able to hold JMU's offense in check. But JMU, remember that, like, all of the key components basically they had last year on their offense and whatever, and I think their coach, they basically are all gone, and a lot of them are at Indiana now. So maybe they were just trying to find their, like, new team chemistry, and they seem to have taken off. I mean, their best opponent that they faced was North Carolina, and they put up 70 on them. So that was a pretty good result for James Madison there, although North Carolina's defense is terrible, but still, if you put up 70 on an ACC team, that's still pretty good, but also, obviously, their defense is definitely in question, as they've held a bunch of their opponents to low scores, but a bunch of not good offenses. And when they finally face a team that does have a good offense, UNC, they gave it up big time, even though they still blew them out. And then their most recent game, it concerns me as far as James Madison a little bit. They lost to UL Monroe, man, but it's possible they were looking ahead to Coastal Carolina. UL Monroe somehow seems to be a team that just, they're winning all these games as underdogs, dude, and I don't understand how. Like, either they're better than we think they are, or they're just catching teams at the right time, and they're maybe just causing teams to mentally lapse against them or something. I don't know what it is, but you could argue that JMU was looking ahead to this Coastal Carolina game because it's a much bigger game than UL Monroe. UL Monroe looking good, though. They're 4-0, 4-1 overall and 2-0 in conference. So I don't know, but somehow JMU got caught there and lost that game. So they're in a little bit of a bounce back spot off of that, in my opinion, but that would not be enough of a reason to take JMU. Coastal Carolina also lost the one game they actually lost the one game they played against an ACC team, so that's their one loss. Losing to Virginia. Virginia's a pretty good team, man. Virginia, I think, underrated, kind of flying under the radar in the ACC there. And Coastal has actually played a tougher schedule than JMU has. I mean, JMU played North Carolina. I think Virginia's probably better than North Carolina. They certainly are better on the defensive side. And Coastal did play Jacksonville State and Old Dominion. I mean, Old Dominion's not looking that good this year, but they have been a good program in recent years, so I don't know. But Jacksonville State's certainly not a bad team. So Coastal, I think, has actually played the slightly tougher schedule. And I believe Coastal got absolutely thrashed by James Madison last year. So that's the other aspect of this. I think there is a little bit of a revenge scenario here for Coastal. JMU beat them badly last year. I think it was something like 56-14, something like that. I could go look it up. It was one of the last games of the season. JMU, they wound up petitioning to get into a bowl. I think they were still fighting to try to win the Sun Belt, which I think they wound up not doing. So I think neither of these teams won. I forget who won it last year. I don't know. You'd have to go look it up. I think it was, what was it, Troy against, I forget. I don't know. Go figure it. I forget who won the Sun Belt. I don't think it matters as far as this game is concerned because James Madison absolutely thrashed Coastal last year. But, of course, James Madison, most of those guys that they had on their offense are gone. Coastal does have a different offense than they started with last season because Grayson McCall was their starting quarterback last year. But he, I believe, got hurt like midway through the season, and now he's gone. He's on NC State, who I might actually mention in a second. But Coastal, the guy who's playing for them now, their quarterback, actually was on the team last year, Vasco. He was the guy who played out the stretch run for them last year as their quarterback, and he played in that game against James Madison last year. So he has more experience with the Coastal team than what we're going to get out of James Madison's offense here. And Vasco actually didn't do that badly in that game against JMU, even though JMU did crush them. It was mostly a problem on Coastal's defense more than anything else. Vasco put up okay numbers in that game, like 200-something yards passing and something like that. He wasn't that bad in the game, and he's got more experience under his belt now. So there are reasons that I could see making a case for both sides here. I mean, I think the over is actually probably the better way to play this, even though you're joining the public and fading the pros versus Joes look in the market there if you do take the over here. But these teams, I mean, I just don't know if they're going to be able to stop each other defensively. Neither defense is very strong. Both offenses have been pretty good. The strongest lean out of any of these games, I think, is in this middle game here, and it would be on taking the points with Middle Tennessee State. Ole Miss is good. Yeah, they are. I'll talk about Ole Miss right now, actually. Rangers, the Rangers are good. I mean, they blasted Pittsburgh, which I didn't mind seeing that last night. Rangers, they still have Shesterkin, right? Shesterkin, I forget how to pronounce his name, in net there. I mean, he's sick. Middle Tennessee at Louisiana Tech here. Speaking of Ole Miss, I believe Middle Tennessee had them as one of their opponents. This is a misleading point spread in this game, I think. So if you were to force me to play any of these games in the college football slate, I would take the points with Middle Tennessee. This is also a low total, although it's gone up from 48 to 49. We see 57% of tickets on the under and 93% of the cash is actually on the under. So some market indicators that the under might actually be getting some money there, which is also good if you want to take an underdog. You want an underdog in a game that's going to be low scoring because the points are worth more. Louisiana Tech's down from 5 to 4.5, 84% of tickets on them and only 76% of the cash. I think Louisiana Tech is probably perceived as being the better of these two teams. I think they've been the better of these two programs. You say both teams have bad records so far, but Middle Tennessee has faced, in my opinion, the much tougher schedule. I mean, look at the schedule. They barely won against Tennessee Tech. So, yeah, maybe that's an indictment, but maybe they just were overlooking an FCS team and just didn't really, put full focus on that game because they had a huge game against Ole Miss up next. And, of course, Ole Miss is really, really good, and they just got stomped by Ole Miss. But can you really blame Middle Tennessee for that? I don't think so. And then coming out of that, they lost to Western Kentucky, who I'll mention in a minute because they're playing tonight as well. Western Kentucky, not a bad team either this year. Then they played Duke, who, even though I've made fun of Duke was undefeated to start the season. And Duke, they're still an ACC team, man. So Middle Tennessee losing to them, even though they lost pretty badly to kind of a mediocre at best ACC team. I don't think it's that glaring, really. And then Memphis has actually been playing pretty well as well. Losing on the road at Memphis, none of these losses are really that egregious. They're not that bad for Middle Tennessee. So I think they're better than their 1-4 record looks. This is a second straight road game, however, for Middle Tennessee. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the rest scenario. Well, I think I'll go back and look actually real quick in this game. James Madison and Coastal, I think they both actually are on short rest coming into this. I think they both played on October 5th. James Madison did. So they both just played on Saturday. So they're both on short rest, JMU and Coastal. So JMU really might have been overlooking UL Monroe just because even though they've been playing well, their name recognition is really not there. In this game, Middle Tennessee has been off since September 28th. So they've had a bye. So that bye can definitely break up that losing momentum for them. So you go into a bye on a bad note like that, you use it to change some things and try to fix some things. And like I said, they face such good opponents that I think that they are. I'm not convinced that they're actually the worst of these two teams between them and LA Tech. I think it's close, to be honest. So I think the point spread is a little bit too high in this one. If you give Louisiana Tech basically just home field and maybe just a slight tick upward besides that, I think 3.5 maybe. 3.5, maybe 4 at the most is a more fair line in this game. So I do think there is some value on Middle Tennessee in this one. In Middle Tennessee, their quarterback Vattiato, Italian man there, I guess. He and the running back Creedle, actually, who's been their leading rusher the last 2 games. They've both been there for a while. They were both there last year. And I believe they played against Louisiana Tech last year. I can go look right now. And I think they actually beat them. Yeah, they beat them by 8 last year at home. So Vattiato and Creedle were both there. So this Middle Tennessee offense has been intact for a while. So they do have experience playing with each other to some extent and playing in this system. So that's not really going to hurt the Middle Tennessee case in this game really at all, other than the fact that, do you think Louisiana Tech's going to want revenge of any sort in this game? I'm not so sure about that. I don't know if that game was really considered to be that big a game. Louisiana Tech, I mean, their schedule is much, much worse, man. They played North Carolina State, NC State, who I just mentioned, does have Grayson McCall, now the good quarterback who was on Coastal Carolina last year, but I don't think he played in that game that they played against Louisiana Tech. I think NC State beat them without McCall. So this does not look good, in my opinion, for Louisiana Tech. Their schedule is much, much weaker. The biggest opponent they played was that NC State team on the road. I'm still not going to – I'll still give them a pass for losing that game, but it was NC State without McCall. So without their starting quarterback there, they only beat Nichols, an FCS team, by 8. But then again, maybe they were just looking ahead to bigger games. So both teams had kind of a close call against an FCS team in that first game. Both Louisiana Tech and Middle Tennessee both did. So I don't really know if there's anything that we can really take away from that. But the rest of the schedule has been weak, man. They barely beat Tulsa. Tulsa, not a very good team this year. And then they lost to Tulsa. They lost a close game to Tulsa. And Tulsa's not very good. And then they lost to Florida, Illinois, my favorite team, Florida International, FIU. They lost on the road to that FIU team, who I really don't think is very good, man. So both of those losses are pretty bad-looking losses, to be honest. So I think Middle Tennessee, they've had that gauntlet of a schedule. Middle Tennessee is the much more battle-tested out of these two teams here. So I lean to the Middle Tennessee side. Louisiana Tech, they both had the same amount of rest, so both teams went into a bye on a pretty bad note, and they're coming out of a bye, probably having tried to fix some things going into that bye. But Middle Tennessee, I just think, is not getting enough credit in this line for having faced the much tougher schedule and probably having a little bit of an experience edge. And Louisiana Tech, I think they've had some quarterback turnover here. As you can see, their leading passer has been different in multiple different games. So I don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation there. So I like Middle Tennessee in that one. And I guess because the cash is coming in on the under, I would lean to the under as well. But you almost went to Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, I mean, I think they're a pretty decent school, man. The Turducken, what are we talking about? We're not in November yet, man. Evanescence, Amy Lee graduated from Middle Tennessee. I did not know that. She's got a hell of a voice, man. I like her voice. I like that song that she did with Seether more than I like Evanescence. But Evanescence, yeah, they're all right. I mean, that one song they had, definitely a banger. Bring Me to Life. Wake me up inside. All right, UTEP and Western Kentucky is the last game here. This is the ugliest of these three games, I think. Even though Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, you could argue they're ugly teams, but at least it looks like a more competitive matchup than this one. Although I kind of lean to the UTEP side in this one just because of the scheduling spot. Western Kentucky's a huge favorite. They're up from 18 to 19.5. They're public a little bit with 53% of tickets, 65% of the cash on the other side, though, on the UTEP side. So it does look like the cash discrepancy is on the UTEP side, even though the line has moved up a little bit. Total is stationary at 57. 60% of the tickets on the over and 76% of the cash actually on the under in this one. I mean, just by default, I would lean to the under just because that's the way the cash is going, but I don't really have a feeling at all for I don't do a lot with college football totals at all right? I look at sides mostly, so. But if you like the UTEP side, the under might make a little more sense because they're probably correlated. Western Kentucky, I mean, they're looking like they did pretty well so far. I mean, they beat that Middle Tennessee team that I just mentioned, I think is at least better than we think they are. They beat Toledo, but I mean, Toledo, they're one of the better teams in the MAC still, but I think they've had some turnover there, so I don't know that game looks that great. They got crushed by Alabama. I mean, they had to face Alabama, and they got killed. What can you say about that? Not much. And then they had a close game that they actually blew the game against BC, but BC was without their best player, their quarterback, Castellanos. I'm pretty sure he was out of that game. So that might be a little bit misleading if you just look and say, oh, Western Kentucky played really well against BC. Yeah, they did. It was still a tough spot for them. They played pretty well as a big underdog, and they are now coming out of that. But they are coming off a bye now, I believe, so they've had extra time off. So Western Kentucky's the more rested team coming into this, but they went into a bye off of that big game against BC, and now they have a lowly UTEP team who has a terrible record, and they have a team with a much better record, Sam Houston, up next in the middle of next week in another one of these primetime games. So Sam Houston is a little bit of a better team. So could Western Kentucky overlook UTEP? It does look a little bit sandwichy to me just because they are coming off that big game where they put in a big effort against BC. But then again, yeah, they did have a little bit of extra time off after doing that. And then they do have Sam Houston, who's been playing pretty well so far this season, up next. So it is a spot where they could overlook a pretty bad-looking UTEP team. UTEP has certainly looked ugly so far, but their schedule hasn't been really that easy. I mean, they had to face Nebraska on the road. Nebraska's good. They lost to Southern Utah, which that's obviously their worst loss. That's an indictment, losing to an FCS team, so that's not good. Losing to Liberty. Liberty's not a bad team. And then Colorado State, they're not a good team by any means, but they are still like a Mountain West team, so it's still a step up in class. And UTEP didn't play that badly in that game, really. And then they lost to the aforementioned Sam Houston team, who's been one of the better teams in Conference USA so far. This is a Conference USA matchup here. And they might be focused now coming in to face Western Kentucky, who's been one of the better teams in this conference for a while. UTEP doesn't have any wins so far, and they do have less time off, but they've still had a full week off, so they're playing basically on a regular rest scenario here. So I don't think the extra rest is going to be that helpful to Western Kentucky, especially when they're in what kind of looks like a sandwich spot. UTEP's still looking for their first win of the season, but the other thing you can look at here is that McConnell is actually UTEP's starting quarterback, and he was injured, I think, for the first few weeks. He was their quarterback for the last part of last season, I think, so he's their guy. He came back, and they played a little bit better, at least, in his couple of games. So he is back. I think he is playing in this game. So I think maybe you can throw that Southern Utah loss out a little bit just because McConnell was out for that one. So I mean, that's pretty much the breakdown there. I don't know what else I have to say about that game other than Western Kentucky, their offense has actually looked a little bit better as of late with who's their guy there? Veldkamp has come in and he's taken over as their quarterback because they didn't know who their quarterback was going to be to start this season after Austin, whatever the hell his name is, graduated, and I believe he's on the Bears practice squad now. Veldkamp has come in, and he looks like he is the guy now for Western Kentucky, so they've been a little bit better under him as well. So I lean to the UTEP side more than anything else now, just because of the scheduling spot. And then before I get out of here, NFL, really quickly, we have 49ers Seahawks. This is a hard game to read, man. 49ers are up from 3.5 to 3.5 with juice. They are the public side slightly with 56% of the tickets. They do have 65% of the cash on them. So the cash is on the 49ers side. Totals up from 48.5 to 49.5 with 57% of the tickets and 60% of the cash on the over. So it does look like there is some movement towards the over in this one. I don't have a good feel on the total, man. I've heard professional bettors on both sides of the total here, and it is hard for me to read because you could argue that both of these teams could show up and play defense here, and it's going to be like a big heavyweight battle because these are conference opponents, conference foes. But then on the other hand, you could argue that both of these offenses could do decently in this game. It's really hard to figure this out, man. I see conflicting ways to look at the total and conflicting ways to look at the side, really. My first lean was San Francisco, and that is where the cash is coming in, and the lines moved up a little bit. I kind of liked the San Francisco side because people are going to look at this and think, wait a minute, you have below 500 San Francisco team? I think a 2-3 up against a 3-2 Seattle team. How is San Francisco favored on the road? And they're 0-2 on the road, too. How are they favored on the road against a 3-2 Seattle team? Well, the odds makers are telling you that San Francisco is the better team. And I've mentioned this before, that Seattle, they haven't had any impressive wins so far. They beat Bo Nix in his rookie debut. And Bo Nix really has not been putting up good stats so far. They beat Jacoby Brissett's New England Patriots, not that impressive either. And then they beat Miami with no Tua. So really, Seattle has not done anything impressive. You were looking and thinking, well, maybe with Mike McDaniels there, I think that's his name. He was the defensive coordinator for the Ravens last year and built that great defense. Now he's Seattle's head coach, taking over for Pete Carroll. Oh, their defense is going to be awesome. Looked pretty good those first 3 weeks, but against basically no good quarterbacks. Then they faced a good Detroit offense, and they fell off the rails, and they really did not play well defensively. And then the Giants were able to do some damage against them as well. Not as much as Detroit did, but the Giants, not that great in offense, and they were without Malik Neighbors in that one. So that doesn't look good. So as far as which of these teams is better, I think the odds makers are telling you what you need to know here. San Francisco is the better of these two teams, and they faced a tougher schedule. They faced the Jets, Minnesota, Rams. I mean, still not that easy of an opponent to face. The Rams definitely facing a lot of injuries, though. New England, yeah, that's a weak opponent. And then Arizona is just so hit or miss. You don't even know who Arizona really is. But both of these teams are also coming off embarrassing losses, so both teams are in bounce-back spots. San Francisco, pretty ugly loss to Arizona, and Seattle, ugly loss to the Giants, which may be the uglier of the two losses, really. But both teams are going to be in bounce-back mode, and when you have a game where both teams are probably going to be focused and refocused, I think the better team actually wins out in that scenario, and that would be the 49ers. The Seahawks are staying at home, though, so I know these quick turnaround times, you have no rest Thursday night. The home team tends to have an advantage because they get to stay at home or play at home where they're used to playing, whereas the road team sometimes has to prepare for an unfamiliar venue or unfamiliar environment and have to go on the road on a short week. Obviously, this is a division game, so that's not the case here. The 49ers play at Seattle every year. So that mitigates that a little bit, where the 49ers, they know how to prepare to play in Seattle. So the fact that they are familiar with playing there is going to make it a little bit easier for San Francisco to have to go on a short week to Seattle, and they're not having to play in a different time zone or anything like that, because they're just staying in the Pacific time zone. Both teams are, so that's not really a factor here. So all that being said, yeah, my lean would be to the 49ers here, and Brock Purdy has really good numbers against Seattle as well, so he has been able to do damage against Seattle. And the 49ers are getting healthier. Like, Deebo Samuel's back. Most of their pieces are back on offense, except Christian McCaffrey is still out in this game. So, yeah, when Brock Purdy has done a lot of this damage, he has had Christian McCaffrey with him as part of that offense. That's true, but I think Seattle's defense is very, very questionable right now, looking at the two good offenses that they've faced so far. And the 49ers do also have a good offense. So, again, that would have me leaning to the 49ers. The only hesitation that I would have is that the Seahawks defense is now different than what Brock Purdy had been facing in the past. The Seahawks with McDaniels, or whatever his name is, there are too many McDaniels, man. Josh McDaniels, whatever McDaniels is over at, no, it's Mike McDonald, right? I keep saying McDaniels. It's McDonald, right? Not McDaniels from Miami either. I think it's Mike McDonald, the Doobie Brothers guy, I think is his name. I don't even know, man. McDonald, McDaniels, whatever. McD, you will call him. The new head coach for Seattle. The thing is, he runs a lot of man coverage, and Brock Purdy actually does worse against man coverage. So maybe he'll actually take a step back, because he's going to be without McCaffrey, and he's facing a man scheme now here, which he does significantly worse against. I don't know, though, because he does do well historically against Seattle, but yet again, like I said, it is a different defensive scheme now for Seattle, and we do remember that whatever his name is, McD, Seattle's coach here, McDonald, whatever, where was he last year? Baltimore. He was the DC. That Baltimore defense destroyed Brock Purdy last year. If you remember that game, I think it was Christmas Eve night, maybe, or Christmas night. I guess it was Christmas night. Yeah, Christmas night. And Brock Purdy had one of his worst games of his career in that game at home against that Baltimore defense. The Seattle defense is not the same as that Baltimore defense, but it was this coach and his scheme that really destroyed Brock Purdy, though. So Purdy has not done well against this guy's defense. So I'll just throw that out there, even though the Seahawks probably don't quite have the personnel that the Ravens did last year. So really tough read on all these games, man. I got to get out of here. Those are my reads on these games. No plays today, but thanks for hanging out in the chat, guys. Tower Gang, follow me, Tower Gang Tone, and follow the Tower Gang podcast. We had a shortened hurricane episode last night, which I actually thought was fun. It was funny. We did about a half hour last night with no Jose, because he was in the thick of the hurricane and Top was about to get hit by the hurricane. I believe we're going to have an episode tonight, full-length episode with Owen Benjamin tonight, I believe. So look out for that tonight. Tower Game, baby. And sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/Tower Game. You'll get live pre-shows and post-shows, and get to hang out in the Telegram with us and submit questions to the mailbag as well, which in this case, they could be mailbags directed at Owen Benjamin. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Nada, thanks. Novum, thanks, guys. Seth, thank you all for hanging out. I would say let's get some wins tonight, but I'm not. I'm taking the night off. So peace out. Have a good night. That was, a big rundown today. All right. Peace out, guys.